Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you're feeling nice and refreshed. You've had your caffeine fix to get you through to 12:30. So we've got, as you can see, a whole suite of new faces here, ready to give you some fantastic content. First up, we've got Guy Boulby, who is Head of Cycling and Walking. And he's from the Department of Transport, from the Active and Accessible Transport Travel Division. Guy's going to be sharing his insight around the cycling and walking strategy, actually, and really unpicking some of the key elements for success there. So please do welcome Guy to the stage. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everybody. So I work in the Department for Transport and local transport issues, and more specifically on active transport and cycling and walking. It's probably worth just explaining what DFT's locus is in this space. So we deal with functional journeys in our department, so it's to do with getting people to work, getting people to places where they can study, to go shopping or see friends and family. So we don't do active travel or physical activities that's to do with leisure or sports. That is the remit of DCMS. But obviously there's a bit of grey area, and some of the discussions we had this morning about creating an environment, a holistic environment that enables people to be more physically active is something we work very, very closely with across Sporting and DCMS and DFT. But today I want to talk to you about our new-ish strategy on cycling and walking, the cycling and walking investment strategy. The aim is to deliver higher levels of physical activity in terms of cycling and walking in England. And I'd like to take you through some of our early successes and challenges that lie ahead. Specifically, I want to cover 7 points. Firstly, why we care about active travel in government. Secondly, what we're trying to achieve and how we're going to be delivering that change. So, what are our main interventions, our main programs of work. What are we starting to see in the statistics? So are we having any success in raising levels of physical activity for active travel? What are the barriers and how are we overcoming these barriers? And then I'll just give a few examples of challenges and of progress against these challenges and next steps. But firstly, what is it we're trying to achieve? Is this it? So this is a scene from the 2008 movie Wall-E. The plot for this is quite fantastical. Basically, the Earth is ruined, and people live in giant starliners that cruise around the Earth, while robots remain on Earth to kind of clean it up and make it kind of habitable. All citizens, they live a very automated lifestyle, so they have very advanced personal mobility, little hover seats that take them around the spaceship and where they want to go. They're highly interconnected, big access to digital systems and digital content, as you can see. But they leave all the heavy lifting to the robots. I'm not sure this is our vision of urban mobility. We're looking for a different type, and that includes cycling and walking. So this has been a manifesto pledge for the Conservative Party for several elections now. There are lots of reasons to invest in active travel. The biggest one by far is health. So obesity costs the NHS £6 billion per year. That's direct costs to dealing with the impacts of physical inactivity and obesity. And there's obviously knock-on costs to society that are much larger than that, around £27 billion per year. Which is why we work very closely with Department of Health, Public Health England, DCMS and Sport England. It's not the only reason we care about active travel. We want to improve air quality. Thousands of deaths a year associated with poor air quality in our towns and cities. We have congestion, and the impact of congestion is huge, £30 billion every year. It's only going to get worse, so by 2040, the levels of traffic on England roads could be 50% or more higher than it is today. And many shorter journeys could easily be cycled or walked. So 2 out of 3 car trips are under 5 miles. That's an achievable distance for most people in terms of active travel. We're also trying to support house building and enabling the economy to grow. And there's an opportunity in the cycling sector to contribute. At the moment, it's estimated to contribute about £5.4 billion per year, supports about 64,000 jobs. If the sector was to grow, then there's far more jobs and growth that are in this sector, and it's therefore part of our industrial strategy. I'll talk a bit about that towards the end. So what is the cycling and walking investment strategy? Well, that's the first statutory strategy that we have. It came out of the Infrastructure Act of 2015. So for the first time, we actually have a legally binding commitment to have a strategy that sets out what we're trying to achieve in active travel and the resources that go into it, and also that sets out some aims and targets. There's a range of aims and targets there around safety, around cycling, walking, and walk to school. The really important ones are actually the ones in the bottom right-hand corner, which is we're looking to double cycling by 2025, so up to about 1.6 billion stages a year. We want to increase walking activity, and actually levels of walking have gone down over time, so how do we reverse that trend and then pick it up and increase it? And how do we get children more active? So we have a specific target in there to do with increasing the percentage of 5 to 10-year-olds that are walking to school. So, being an active travel official and the need to have a bit of physical activity, this is where you can play a part in today's session. So it's time to vote. So you all have, I think, little handheld devices in your arms. And you have to help me think about some of the barriers to increasing levels of cycling. And here are the three barriers I'd like you to consider. So what is it? Is it lack of fitness or confidence in a bike? Is it because the roads are very poor, the road surfaces are very bumpy, there's no direct routes where we want to go? Or is it safety and the perceptions of safety? So do you want to have a quick tap? So while you're doing that, some people at the back are busy counting out the votes. And by magic, they're going to appear. All right, thank you very much. So, most of you pumped for safety and the perceptions of safety, something we touched on actually earlier in the first session. Absolutely right. So I'll move on to my next slide. The survey shows that actually the top 2 reasons why people don't do more cycling is because of safety. So the fear of being involved in a collision. There's too much traffic for me to cycle safely. It's not the only reason, and for those of you who chose some of the other reasons, absolutely right. They're not confident in cycling. Perhaps they've only done some training at school and they haven't taken it up, they haven't commuted, they've lost the habit of getting on the bike, or actually the infrastructure is poor. And you can see there are a raft of other issues there as well, such as your timeliness. Do I have access to a bike? Actually, where I want to go is too far to cycle. And the upshot of that is that actually, more than 60% of drivers think it's just too dangerous to cycle. So how do we get through to them? How do we reach out to wider groups that wouldn't normally take up cycling or be physically active? And what does that mean to our investment program in government? So what is our investment program? Well, we published it in April 2017. We set out over £1 billion of funding that is available and is projected to be spent on cycling and walking. And this investment comes from cycling and walking programs that are specifically funded through ring-fenced pots in DFT. We have wider local transport programs on roads that includes provision for cycling and walking, such as the highways maintenance budget. There are a raft of wider government programs, and local authorities and businesses also create revenues that can be invested locally. Our interventions, I guess you can group them into 3 types. So the first type is infrastructure. So building cycle lanes or supporting local authorities to build cycle lanes in the right places, crossings for pedestrians at junctions, putting in cycle racks and secure facilities. The evidence shows that actually this needs to be supported by a lot of revenue funding for training and for mode shift and behaviour change campaigns so that people are more likely to take up these new facilities. And finally, we need to support local authorities themselves to ensure they have the capability and capacity to roll out prioritised and value for money schemes in this area. In fact, the attractiveness of active travel is far more than we had anticipated when we published the strategy last year. In fact, we now believe there's almost £2 billion of investment going into local cycling and walking schemes, largely drawn from some of these wider funding pots like Transforming Cities Funds, the Housing Infrastructure Fund, the Future High Street Fund announced at budget. So, there's sort of £7 or £8 billion of funding there, but local authorities and mayors are deciding to invest in active travel. A great example is Manchester, who I'll talk about shortly. So not putting in bypasses, tram systems, lots of new bus services and other ways of connecting people in the towns and cities, actually investing in active travel. As a result, investment per head has actually doubled from the last spending review period, from about £3.50 to £7 per head. So here's some examples of what we support. So Cycle Ambition Cities, we support 8 cities in England, not to London. London has their own budget for transport. These cities are the ones where the inhabitants probably have the highest propensity to travel in terms of the number of people going to places, and therefore likely to have high utilisation of infrastructure that is put in. This is a capital scheme. And you'll see that it's led to almost 3,000 cycle parking places, about 500 kilometres of new cycling routes across the country, and lots of schemes around workplaces and schools to enable cycling and walking. That's one example. A second one is about how we integrate cycling into wider modes, and Cycle Rail has been our flagship scheme for about a decade now, which is putting in cycle racks in stations and enabling access to cyclists, and therefore means that cycling can be more integrated into someone's journey. Because we realise that actually, cycling and walking often form part of a journey, but not a complete journey. You might cycle to your local railway station, take the train to work, and then walk to work after that. So how do you enable that kind of multi-mode journey? Secondly, on behaviour change and training, so Bikeability is our big scheme there, a hugely successful scheme, primarily for 5 to 10-year-olds in schools, take you through stages 1 to 3 to be confident on the roads. And this year we had a record-breaking year, actually. So 400,000 school children were trained in the past 12 months, and we have almost 2.5 million children who have had training to enable them to confidently cycle on the roads. We have the Access Fund, which is about improving mode shift campaigns and behaviour change for local authorities. This includes an element of cycle training and wider activities such as things like the Big Bike Revival, which get people back on their bikes to maintain their bikes and understand local cycling routes and guided cycling, that sort of thing. All these things are really important if we're going to be using the new infrastructure properly. It isn't a case of build it and they will come. In fact, a lot of the evidence shows that people are mostly driven by habit when it comes to choosing their travel choices. They may believe very heavily in climate change or the need to act on their physical health, but actually if they've always driven to work, they'll probably drive to work. So how do we break that cycle? And the Access Fund is part of that. And the third thing we're doing is to support local authorities themselves so they actually have the tools and the capability and the expertise to do planning, integrated planning, so that new road systems and infrastructure are thinking about active travel from the outset. And this is something we've been piloting. Well, it's a huge pilot, actually, over 50 local authorities through local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, or LCWIPs. And this means that actually we can identify the schemes that are most likely to be cost-effective, most likely to be utilised, and therefore they are higher up the list in terms of prioritised investment. Local authorities then look to a range of funding sources, including some of the schemes I mentioned earlier around Transforming Cities Fund, perhaps Local Growth Fund, or Housing Infrastructure Fund to get these funded. An example of what we're trying to achieve is in Greater Manchester. So it helps that they have a cycling and walking commissioner, everybody's heard of, Chris Boardman, who is not only is a great sportsman, but actually incredibly good at galvanising action and getting collaborative input. The way they've gone about this is not a top-down approach of saying, okay, TFGM believe we should have cycle routes here and pedestrian crossings here and pedestrian bridges here. Instead, they've said, We've gone to the boroughs and said, you tell me where your routes are. You tell me where you'd like to have more direct routes or smoother cycle lanes or more access. And they build up their beelines approach based on that. And this is a great example because we in government allocated them 250 million for transforming cities, and they want to spend the vast majority on cycling and walking, so about 160 million. And that's just part of a wider programme, wider 10-year programme that'll see investment in Manchester quite similar to levels in Denmark and Holland. So about £1.5 billion of investment over 10 years, about 1,000 miles of routes and lots of road crossings. Okay. So this is what we're doing. Have we done enough? Do our plans look sufficient? Are we likely to be successful? Another chance for you to vote, and then I'll take you through some of the statistics in terms of our progress. So first, we've done, yes, people are doing more cycling and walking. Well done, everybody. Pat on the back. We don't need any more of these conferences or conferences like this. Secondly, no real change. Actually, habits are very difficult to break. Or three, actually, it's getting worse because of the disincentives we have in society. Okay, no real change. Although I see there's lots of optimistic people in the place, so that's great news. Almost a third of you think we have made some success and actually something that's getting worse. So largely you are correct, a very informed audience. So actually since 2006, walking has shown no real change. In fact, it's been plummeting since 2002. We believe we're getting close to arresting the decline. My statistical professionals at work tell me that you need 3 or 4 years of consistent increases before you can actually start to set a trend, but you can see that actually the walking stages are starting to increase, but actually it's a very difficult nut to crack on walking. It's about 5% higher than 2002. And then on cycling, we believe it's the same people, but doing more journeys. So interestingly, pretty flat on number of trips, average number of trips per person per year, about 18, but they've gone up 54% in distance, which indicates we've got a lot more to do to reach out to those who aren't cycling, rather than just supporting those that to do more cycling. And you'll see there's some big differences across some of the cities, and we can learn from that. So you can see Cambridge, Oxford, and York pretty high up. In Cambridge, more than half the people there cycle once a week. So I'll just finish on a bit of a summary of what I've talked about today and some of the opportunities going forward. So it's too early to say if we're making any substantive progress 18 months into our investment strategy. There are some signs of progress. There's lots of good practice going out there, and how do we push on and get that good practice embedded elsewhere. We recognise our aims and targets are very challenging, so doubling walking by 2025, extremely difficult, as well as reducing casualties. And that's why we had the CBIS safety review, so the Cycling and Walking Investment Strategy Safety Review, which published last week and tries to crack some of the big issues to do with safety and the perceptions of safety. We have a very complex delivery chain in government, so DFT sits at the top of and works with about 5 or 6 government departments, dozens of agencies, and obviously hundreds of local authorities and highways authorities. So the secret is to try to integrate our action with wider work and to do the placemaking and to help create livable, safe and active cities. And I'll leave you with a picture of actually what we think the future of urban mobility is more like, which is the front cover of our call for evidence on the future of mobility. I'm pleased to say that active, sustainable travel is one of the 4 guiding principles and priorities for the future of mobility approach. And we're looking at supporting a range of missions going forward to this end, including things like safer streets, improved access to transport, cleaner freight and livable cities. And electric bikes will be one of the most important modes as part of this work. And we need to look at the role of innovation in supporting delivery of our outcomes.